Dr. Sam, how are you recovering from your strongman competition?
Good and in the clear. Time to hit back to full training.
Oh, that's very brave. It's very brave. I'm sure your lower back's going to disagree quite quickly.
Yeah, it was feeling pretty spicy for a bit there, but fortunately, I destroy it every week, so it's pretty used to it.
Yeah, that's enough repetitions, and you'll suddenly, this is the norm. This is the norm. My first strongman competition, the amount of caffeine, aggression, and just central nervous system demand that I had to channel in that one day across 5 events. The following day was confusingly tough in many ways, but I was okay by the Wednesday. Did it on the Sunday. Tuesday was bad. Wednesday I was like, oh, I feel okay.
Exactly.
I feel okay.
Yeah.
So strongman is a fairly primal method of strength application, and in many ways it's one that a lot of people would look at objectively and go, that doesn't look good for you. Oh, his back's bent. How are you meant to? You should be picking out on the stone up with a straight neutral spine, shouldn't you? When in reality, a lot of these things have become misconstrued on the internet. People have certain biases, certain angles that they view things with, and you are very well versed in the literature around what the reality is when it comes to biomechanics, positioning, developing strength across ranges of motion, and what the average person should consider to get the best out of the time that they input into training. Because you'll know 99% of people I interact with, 99% of people you interact with generally probably aren't professional athletes. There are some professional athletes in there, but for the vast majority of people seeking recreational fitness content online, they are seeking exactly that, recreational fitness content, which means how do they get the most out of the time that they put in? And I think that has become a little bit out of control. So strongman's a great example. Why is strongman a fantastic application of strength, even though it might look like it breaks a lot of the boundaries with safe movement?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you get a few key benefits. Number one, it is a relatively straightforward activity. You do, there's an atlas stone, you're going to pick it up. There's not really a distinct rule set. Very few of the events have requirements within them. Like, for instance, I also compete in weightlifting. When you do a clean and jerk, the jerk has very clear rules that you cannot do a wide range of things, and you'll get a red light. Strongman, you can hitch, you can do whatever you want. You're in the clear as long as you get from point A to point B, good to go. And that makes it a relatively low barrier because there's not a lot of rules to learn. 2, while the loads that competitive strongmen use are very high, it's something that can be scaled really well. Like here in my local community, the strongman organization is very involved in trying to get relatively low-level people quite involved. And so, we were talking about before, I was doing a car deadlift, and at face value, it's like, okay, I'm picking up a Toyota Tacoma. The average person ain't going to be able to do that. But what they can do is find an extremely light car, something like a Toyota Yaris, and put it on. And they can scale it to a higher range, make adjustments to where pretty much anybody can come and do it and have fun with it. And it gives a bit more of a spectacle with the enjoyment. Another one that's pretty cool is there tends to be a really engaging community around strongman, which I've seen what you guys have been doing in the running community where you're at, and that's huge. A lot of people train in isolation. They maybe enjoy it, but if you can get around other people and have a passion with it, it just encourages you to train more, train harder, and be more likely to show up on a repeated basis. And those are things that just consistently show up as being incredibly important for long-term health, performance, and all of the above. So, and you know what? It looks really cool. Like if you're going and doing something like the car deadlift or a Conan's wheel, any of these things, they're very odd, unusual activities, but they often look pretty badass. That's a lot of fun.
It is. And I was laughing before this podcast. I'm a bit worn out this week, but I've had a 130 kilo and 150 kilo Atlas stone delivered, which means that I might pretend that I'm not worn out this week and go and give them a crack after this. But the reason I set the scene with the strongman is obviously because you've just done a competition, and I've seen that front and center of your social media, which is great to see. But you posted something the other day that I'm going to read out verbatim because I think it really encapsulates what I wish the fitness industry was, which is how to get results made simple. Show up, mostly do compound exercises, add isolation as needed, generally do 2 to 5 sets, 5 to 15 reps, 60 to 180 seconds rest. When you feel good, try harder. When you don't feel good, show up, just don't go as hard, repeat. And there's people that are listening and they think, what? It's not as simple as that. Nadia Gouliard told me that if I'm not spinning a mace around my head backwards whilst doing backflips, then I'm doing everything wrong and I'm going to break my spine. Therefore, Mr. Sam Spinelli here is actually way off the mark. But you are as well versed in the literature around strength and conditioning as one can be in many ways. And like we've spoken a lot with Dr. Phil Price in this room. He helps us at Omnia. And the overarching conclusions from a lot of the literature are that the basics are king, aren't they?
Yeah. We can make things real fancy. Honestly, I went down that path a long time ago. I was trying to become super high level strength coach and physical therapist. And I was like, okay, let's get into the dirtiest, crazy things and just figure out how complex it can be. And it was just continuously coming back to these things the majority of the time. And it's not as sexy as people probably want, but yeah, the basics, they're king.
How does that apply to the recreational athlete then? Because obviously we both want to push ourselves as individuals at high levels. There'll be people that engage with our content that push at high levels. But for those listening that might be a little bit confused as to what they should be doing from a GPP, from a day-to-day training, from a longevity, health, enjoyment point of view, what are the core principles that we should really focus on?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, if you're not lifting weights probably in the 2 to 3 times per week range, number one, start there. We just see that consistently in research showing that makes huge differences for bone mineral density, which might not sound sexy, but if you are, for instance, a runner and you deal with a bone stress injury, that is a significant injury that can hold you off for months or even years. So lifting weights, boom. Senior individuals, fractures, major concern. And so for pretty much everybody, lifting a few times a week to minimize bone injuries, muscle loss, huge issues. Number two, try to do some sort of endurance work a couple times a week. Even like right now, I coach a handful of high-level powerlifters, weightlifters, and strongmen, and they all do endurance work. It's not very intensive because obviously I don't want it to compete with their demands, but they still do it because at the end of the day, they're humans and they need to survive. And if you die from a cardiovascular accident because you disregarded it and just went all in on lifting and doing some questionable choices with supplementation, then you're probably going to have a difficult time showing up to your competition. So yeah, those things should be number one. And then along with that, like intelligent lifestyle choices you were talking about before. Right now, super stressful time for you, so you're doing a little bit of extra sleep. Smart. Most people, if you're not checking off 6 to 8 hours a night, all these other things just really don't matter that much. You need to walk a reasonable amount, lift a reasonable amount, probably breathe heavy a few times a week, and then sleep. And after that, if you're checking off these boxes, we can start to get fancier, like, oh, do deepened range of motion partials matter for hypertrophy? Maybe, but does it matter for you? Probably not. And so I just see over and over again, people get so lost in these really interesting concepts that they think maybe matter, but they don't even train consistently. They don't do all these things. Like, I don't know if you had this experience where it was the huge surge of the Norwegian method, like, I don't know, a year and a bit ago. And I had these individuals asking me all the time, like, if they should start doing it. And it was like, okay, well, how many runs a week are you doing at the moment? They're like, well, I like 1 to 2. It's like, okay, well, that method requires that you do a double day twice a week and accumulate a high amount of volume the rest of the week anyways. And it's like, it doesn't apply to you. Don't worry about these things. Start with just doing the basics.
It's the grain of sand at the top of the pyramid, which people often focus on. And the fitness industry thrives on that in many ways. And the amount of questions that I get, oh, if I had £1 or $1, to be in the spirit of fairness, for every time I was asked what running shoes I'm wearing, before anyone's asked what my training program has looked like, what my taper looked like, what my years of training in a certain way have looked like. No, running shoes, first and foremost. And often, it's plain and obvious what running shoes they are just by looking at the model I'm wearing. But it's just, it's the fact that is the solution that people believe is going to help unlock the things that they want to achieve, rather than the simple execution of the task that will get them there. And this is where the word recovery becomes such a huge, huge buzzword in the industry, because it has been bastardized significantly and completely misconstrued, in my opinion. I believe the word recovery has become more aligned with snake oil selling than it has done the reality, which is sitting below your MRV and helping yourself maybe just teeter back below it if you do push beyond it a little bit. Because the things that we know that can actually impact recovery, scientifically speaking, only have a marginal impact on what you're doing above and beyond your actual training programming and outputs in terms of fatigue anyway, don't we? So what are your highlights from this world currently? What are the things that you've had to fight hardest against in the world of recovery on the internet?
I'd say probably the hardest. There's two things I'd put as the hardest. Number one is the scale of benefit that people get from things like you were just mentioning. Like, let's just pretend, for instance, ice baths are this wonderfully magical benefit that do help everyone. Pretend. How much do they help? Like in research, when they're comparing this, generally we see that if they do offer benefit, it is so marginal that they can barely detect it. And so a challenge arises where, like, you see someone of significant authority like Joe Rogan or Wim Hof talk about it, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do that because this expert told me. And so then you get more buy-in, which we know the placebo effect increases with your greater buy-in. And so then you're not necessarily getting the specific effect from ice bath, but because you just believe in it. And so that would be number one. And then number two is understanding the difference in time scales, because what helps you today will not necessarily help you tomorrow, and what helps you tomorrow may impact your ability to adapt in the long term. And these are things that can be very difficult to comprehend, but an example is the ice bath, because if, for instance, your situation, like if you were doing something like the squat 500, run a 5-minute mile again, and you wanted to crush it, it would be a reasonable choice to go and have an ice bath after the mile, to go and then have a little bit of decreased inflammatory response, decrease the swelling, everything from that hard effort run, and then go back and then properly warm up for the squat. Viable option. The challenge is that most people don't consider that what we see is with this decreased inflammation that you have reduced effects, positive effects for your adaptation benefits from running. And so if you regularly do this, you're going to have lower amounts of adaptation to the activities that you want to do. And so you don't improve your endurance as much. You don't get as strong. You don't increase your hypertrophy as much. And we see this across pretty much every kind of quote unquote recovery modality that people think is really cool. Like sleep is the one that stands out that, you know, you do more and it's always better. Generally, I'm sure there's some outliers. In contrast, it's like, you know, compression boots, massage even has some negative effects in some situations, and ice bath, cold therapy, all these different things can have some negative effect in the long term for people because they reduce positive things that we view as negative, like inflammation.
Physiologically speaking, being the key detail, because
Yeah.
I do think that there are. I think the easy win that comes with an ice bath and that willingness to step into resilience is a big benefit, and that's a great way to start your day. It's supercharged caffeine, but I do think that a lot of people have taken a lot to. I mean, the whole work hard, recover harder trope that you often see coming out of somebody's mouth with their chin bobbing above some ice cubes is kind of where I believe this has spiraled out of control a little bit, because it's the lack of focus on doing the basics consistently well over a long and sustainable period of time isn't nearly as exciting. And that means that for those that are looking to engage with forward motion, the things that are more front facing to them, that are easier to access through stimulations on screens left, right and center, is not doing the basics well over time, because that's not nearly as sexy, is it? So how do you encourage people to cut through the noise and find what will get them to execute the basics well? Because I think for longevity, for sustainability, for people's general health, well-being, and most importantly, enjoyment of training, trying to find that is the key.
Yeah, normally I try to approach it through a few different lenses. I don't know if the listeners or yourself have ever read the book Atomic Habits. I think it's a fantastic choice here. So the first thing I try to have people do is really understand what their why is behind these things. Because at first it might be, yeah, I want to get stronger because it's cool. I want to build more muscle mass to look good in a shirt, or any of these things. But there's usually a deeper underlying meaning that is actually driving it. Like, for instance, you want to get more jacked because you're concerned about your actual self-image and this thing negatively impacts your mental health. And having a reasonable grasp of this will then hopefully help reaffirm some of the choices that we're going to be making. Then we want to try to navigate how we can make some improvements in your consistency across the board by looking at some habit-based changes that we can do. For instance, if you are struggling with showing up to the gym, can we find ways to make it a easier transition for you, whether that's changing gyms, whether that's increasing the equipment that you have at home, something to where you have less opportunity to say no, and it's less friction in the approach of getting there. And then apply that across the diverse options. And then for things that we're trying to minimize, like for instance, if you're an individual who wants to try to improve your overall health and you have excess body weight and it's holding you back from better running, lifting, and likelihood of dying, then you just want to try to create increased friction to the activities that are possibly holding you back. Like if you're someone who really binges hard at night, let's get rid of the options that are available in your home. Let's make them less easy to access. If you got a 2-story house, put them the farthest place away in your home. That way they are just more difficult to get to instead of just right where you're easy to grab. And so those two general things of manipulating friction to where you want to favor something versus disencourage it usually helps a lot in getting people to make some choices around their consciousness and what they're actually doing. Because if we can minimize the energy that you have to apply to doing things that are desirable, you're more likely to do it, and it takes less of your actual, motivation, energy, self-will, whatever we want to call it. And in contrast, if we can make it more difficult, it's the same thing. You don't have to, or you're going to have to use more if you want to do it. If that bag of chips is going to take you 2 flights of stairs to get to, you're probably not going to go get them that easily.
The lifestyle focus training, like the relationship with training, relationship with habits like this to improve lifestyle in individuals, is intertwined in many ways with the discussion narrative around pain management or reducing pain through exercise from a physical therapy point of view, from a strengthening point of view, some of the things that you mentioned early on. I know that you're very well versed in this in terms of what actually helps, what might not so much, and more importantly, what corners of the internet are telling you to bulletproof this and bulletproof that in things that might not necessarily warrant such a bold claim. So what are people... What should people be focusing on to alleviate pain through physical therapy, through training? Because it's a minefield, isn't it? I know it's a very open-ended question, but I think, is it as simple as doing the basics well? And is it highlighting your weaknesses and making them strengths? Or is it a lot more individual than that?
I'd say that those things are all very valuable and do definitely play a role. It's a extremely complicated topic that I continuously try to understand and appreciate and figure out how I can simplify it. And first and foremost, we do see some consistency across the board in research that has some merit, that typically individuals who are healthier overall tend to experience less chronic pain and less instances of even short bouts of pain. And so we see this for shoulder pain, knee pain, lower back pain, across the board. So if we can get you healthier, which usually comes from a mix of the basics like we were just discussing, are you sleeping a reasonable amount? Are you regularly exercising? Are you getting a respectable amount of steps per day? If you're checking off these boxes, then you're in a good place overall. Like, sure, you may still have something to address, and we can talk about that in a second, but if you're not doing these things, that's usually one of the first things to start working towards. And it doesn't have to be dramatic changes. I have an online client. I've been working with her for 2 years. I talked about her recently on my page. She's an individual who came to me. She has lupus and also some secondary other life health issues. And she was dealing with bilateral hip pain, which was diagnosed by her doctor as bursitis. She was dealing with extreme plantar fasciitis. She had to have her big toe surgically replaced, where they do like a joint replacement on her big toe. And then she's also had some upper body issues. And so it's a lot to try to navigate, but she barely walked. She minimally exercised. She was super inconsistent with sleep. And so those were the first things. We're like, okay, let's just try to lay down some basic things. And with those basic things, a very quote unquote rudimentary training program of a squat, push, pull, hinge, and then trying to gradually every week increase her steps at a reasonable rate and increase her sleep at a, again, reasonable rate, decreased tons of her symptoms. We didn't get rid of lupus, obviously, like it's a complex medical condition that I don't manage, but the rest of her pain issues gradually diminished to the point where now, again, this is 2 years, so it's a pretty long time. She dealt with them 4 years, but her plantar fasciitis, totally gone. Her hip pain, minimally there. The upper body stuff, not there. And so you can make some pretty dramatic improvements that people often struggle with, like these really significant impairments with basic things. And I call them basic, but they're not necessarily simple or easy, because for a lot of people, walking, whatever amount of steps we pick, can be difficult. Like if you're someone, like right now, I have this individual who flew in from New York City to come train with me. And when we were chatting, he said he typically averages 1,500 steps per day. And like he goes and he lifts weights, but he barely has to walk to get there. And he has a job where he sits at a desk all day. And so like 1,500 steps is like, I can't even imagine functioning on that little. I don't even know how that's possible. But that's what his watch shows that he's getting every day. And so then it was a discussion of, okay, well, you want to make these improvements in a number of different health factors. We're going to try to make some reduces in your injuries. I think this is a pretty significant aspect. And so for him, we started to discuss how we can sneak in little bouts of increased stepping or walking to improve his step count. And I anticipate it's going to make a pretty meaningful change for him. So first and foremost, across the board for people, these are things that usually need to be addressed in some way, because if we're looking at a lot of health conditions, we see it show up over and over again.
I know you made a point of clarifying a few things on back pain specifically in contention of some things that have been said on a podcast of Andrew Huberman. I mean, no way meaning to start he said, she said, but there were a few points that you really did want to highlight as misleading or potentially pointing people in the wrong direction in terms of what the solutions to their problems might be. Back pain is a complex and largely individual issue for the most part, I would imagine. But again, verbatim, I'm just going to read your own words back to you just so we've set the scene. But back pain is not caused by weakness. Back pain is not caused by posture. Back pain is complex and not so simple. And you reference this as potentially harmful to many listeners for the following reasons.
Yeah, and that's where I would follow up with, we were talking about the basics in most cases. And so then when we start to look at why people have pain, it's very complicated. Like right now, I have a coach at my gym who is dealing with this lateral knee pain. If we go and we test the guy, he is a unit, incredibly strong. He can, squat double body weight, no problem. He has the ability to jump super high distances, windmill dunks, no problem. And so like, are you going to come and say that the reason he has knee pain is because he's weak? That doesn't really justify. And the same thing can be the case for back pain. Like there's so many instances of power lifters, extremely dedicated and well-decorated strongmen and weightlifters who have back pain. And I would never say that they're weak. They're clearly absolutely freak human beings and very strong, but something is the reason for their pain. And the same thing goes for the average individual. Like if your mom has back pain, is it because she's weak? Like what is the activity that's so stressfully demanding on her system that she is too frail to be able to do it? Like I don't know your mom, but probably not the case. Like most people are not maxing out their strength requirements on their back on a day-to-day basis. Like the funny story is that we literally, I don't know about you, but like I max out my strength
in about an hour. Yeah, that's for sure.
And I don't have regular back pain. Like sure, it's sore sometimes because I did literally max it out, but otherwise I'm fine. And that's where the divide comes, is that we get these narratives that come because when you do have someone train, so doing the active resistance training, which does tend to transfer over to strength changes, we see reductions in pain. And so then someone takes that and says, okay, if X, then Y equals Z. And it's a dangerous path of going down a post hoc fallacy where you think that that's what is the reason for it. But it's actually that it's a lot deeper, because there's multiple things that occur when we do this active resistance training. The individual starts to empower themselves. They start to challenge beliefs around their frailty and their weakness, and starting to gain more confidence in the usage of their back. They explore ranges of motion. They cause metabolic changes. All of these things occur at the same time. And so, is pain due to weakness? Probably not. Are there instances where it might be the case? Sure. In contrast, do most people benefit from lifting, getting stronger? Absolutely. Definitely. Even if it's maybe not specifically, we'll call it current back pain, future back pain might benefit from it. Like we see this right now. There's a fantastic group of researchers in Australia where they're doing this study called the Lift More trials, where they're essentially taking older individuals, usually the cutoff is around 55, and then having them smash squats, deadlifts, overhead press, and I think jumping pull-ups. And they're hitting them hard. They're doing like 3x5 at near failure. And they are making improvements in their bone mineral density, their muscle mass, and seeing positive changes in their health factors, reductions in fractures, all super desirable things that pay off in the long term for back health. Because the back pain that many of us may deal with at this current time could be related to one thing, whereas in older years it might be related to other factors, like when you have a fall and you fracture something.
So is your main contention is that we can't simply make sweeping generalizations in this sphere?
I definitely say that, yeah. Because the problem comes, and this is where we do actually have stronger research, is that the things that we say to patients or clients, general public, whatever phrasing you want to put on this, the research is around what a clinician says to a patient heavily impacts what that person believes and the outcomes follow from that belief. Such as if I tell a patient that they have back pain because they're weak, they are more likely to think negative effects around their back, that they are frail, and that if they don't address it through the act of strengthening, because most people won't follow up and do it anyways, then they will continuously keep having this belief, and they're more likely to have persistent pain from it.
Interesting. Okay, so we with Omnia, whenever we've had discussions with Dr. Phil Price, who's a senior lecturer in biomechanics and strength and conditioning over here in the UK, the answer he'll give to pretty much anything, any direct question, is it depends. And that upsets people, because people want pithy answers that they can take away and more often than not apply to their own coaching business, which is kind of where we really do want to dig our heels in, because especially when research is considered, it does depend. Conclusions in research can't be enormously conclusive because we don't have dream control trials. Dream control trials would involve years of an individual's life and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's the challenge, is that individual components of information form the knowledge that then allows the individual to make their own decisions within their own set of circumstances. But there is a significant habit of sweeping generalizations, sweeping the internet at the moment. So for you as a practitioner, for you as someone who's highly educated in this space, how do you navigate the frustrations I can imagine you feel on a day-to-day basis when you see person X saying that squats are the worst thing that you can do? Recently on the Mark Bell Powercast, somebody was comparing doing Class A drugs with bro lifting as the same thing, just to show how far gone we are from logic in some things. So do you just stay in your own lane, or do you feel compelled to try and dispel these things?
I go back and forth on this a lot. This is actually very challenging one for me, because I have spoken out a modest amount of times in the past, and a challenge is that I am at my core value a person who thinks kindness first and to be charitable, and not like, I think that the person that made that statement is just uneducated about the topic and is saying things with a platform that they unjustly have probably, and I want to give the benefit of the doubt. But if I come forward and make a post where I'm super kind like that, like what I generally do, it does okay, not fantastic traction, which is fine in the grand scheme of things. Like, I don't need to reach every person in the world, but the amount of people that see it is so dramatically less than the people that see that. In contrast, I've almost never done this. I've only a couple times come in, I'd say, hotter and more aggressive about the person, and it does way better. But it's not really who I am. Like, I don't know if you guys know who Adam Meekins is. Good friend of mine, and he's great at that. That's his thing. He loves being real hot and spicy. I guess it's in your guys' blood. And like, he reaches so many people with it. The only challenge is that even with reaching more people, the way that you do that tends to get more pushback. Like, if you look at the ratio of comments underneath like one of my posts versus one of Adam's, I'd say that I'm probably 10% negative, whereas Adam's is probably 75% negative. And so then if you do this where like the stuff he's saying is true and it points out how dumb some of the things people say are, but it tends to create this pushback, this backfire effect. I don't know if you know that in psychology, where if you say something that challenges the person's beliefs in a confrontational way, they're more likely to push back aggressively and double down on their own belief. And so if I come in, I'm like, okay, like, I don't know if you know Zach Tellender. He just posted about how, I think it's a Strongman Oberst is his last name, something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's the clip where he's saying that unless NFL athletes don't deadlift, they're doing trap bars, and unless you're being tested on deadlifts, then there's no merit to doing them, something like that.
Yeah, it's a couple of years old anyways. But yeah, and the challenge is that you're going to get people that just refuse to believe any of those pieces of information. They'll say, I'm only going to believe this. I'm not, like, deadlifts are super bad. This guy said it. He's a strong guy. Which, by the way, I worked in professional sports. That's not true. And I worked in NFL, and they do, in fact, do conventional deadlifts and barbell deadlifts. So, but it doesn't matter. Like, no one's going to care because a strongman who's not even in the NFL said that.
It's difficult to navigate, isn't it? And I think critical thinking skills within the individual should be at the heart of all of this, especially on the internet where reels, TikToks are feeding this culture of please give me a pithy, simple, binary thing to take away so that I can regurgitate it in another setting sooner or later. And yeah, I think there's a need. I've heard you speak about this before, and it's often been my frustration. I know it was a bit of Jamie, who's just behind the sort of monitor here, having studied sport and exercise science at Loughborough, is there's a bit of a tendency in strength and conditioning in exercise physiology to try and convolute simple concepts. I guess there is in academia in general terms, but great example is PNF stretching. Is this mysterious, often referred to set of mechanisms that in reality is actually quite simple, but the sort of complexity of information and delivery of it is what leads people confused about when they should be stretching, how they should be stretching, when they should be applying it. S&C coaches I've seen operate and be placed into sports teams and things often feel the need to reinvent the wheel to make a name for themselves, to be able to be seen to be doing something different. Joel Seedman, good example. Every single post is reinventing the wheel, which is clearly for the sake of engagement, and he's hit a very good formula there. So fair play in some capacity, but in others less so. But having been through that cycle a little bit yourself, admittedly, what was the moment where you realized that actually your life was simpler, the information was easier to digest, and actually it had a better impact on the people you're working with by just keeping things really simple?
Yeah, I think once I started to gain a better, deeper understanding of some of my critical reasoning skills, which came from just having very good mentors and people guiding me later on, that I saw that there was a lot of overlap and similarities across things that tended to present very good results and benefits. And if I could do a good job of explaining that to my athletes, to my clients, to my patients, I got more buy-in and better results from them, because people don't necessarily want really fancy, complicated things. What they really want is to understand why they're doing something and how it's going to benefit them. And if you can crush that explanation, be confident in it, be able to explain it well at their level, which I think is a skill in itself, then people are more likely to trust you and believe in that process. And so like Joel Seedman, he's coming in hot. He is telling you about something but he's doing it in an extremely confident way, and that's huge. And whereas like I meet clinicians all the time, I get tons of interns from the local kinesiology university. I get interns from physio schools, and they aren't comfortable telling people why they're doing something. They're not confident in the answers. They don't have a strong rationale behind the why. And so then when they're doing things, you can see that the person that they're talking to isn't really confident in it. Whereas like if you can come with passion, even if it's not, a solidified, like this is everything answer, but it's like, we're going to be doing this because this is the purpose behind it and why we're going to do it. It's going to benefit you for these reasons. Yeah, they're going to have confidence in it. And like when we look at, again, I'm fortunate to get to work with some pretty cool athletes from the online sphere, and they sometimes need quote unquote like fancy things, but there's fundamental principles behind it. Like right now, I've been working with a UFC fighter with a high ankle sprain, and the things that he's doing are, I'd say, on the fancier side. He has a baseline of good foundations already set. And as we're doing these fancier things, I'm not telling him that they're, resetting bones or anything like that. It's like we're trying to improve this capacity because you have a deficit in the strength, abilities, and tolerance. Your rate of force is limited in these motions, and we need to raise it up because when you are kicking someone in the octagon at these high speeds, your ankle isn't able to tolerate it. Like that's the root of it. And, they can understand that at their level. And so then they're more likely to trust you.
So for anyone at that stage in the career where they feel the need to reinvent the wheel, to be seen, to make a name for themselves, is your lesson from an illustrious career to date, keep it simple, but have unfaltering belief in your view on why these things should be done?
Yeah. And if you can answer it incredibly well, like some of the, I'd say, content that's doing really well out there is not crazy fancy. Like there's a guy, Vernon Griffith. I don't know if you guys know him. He makes, like, sure, it's maybe has a little bit of fanciness to it, but at the end of the day, like, he's just explaining it exceptionally well, justifying it and translating it over. It's not complex, not justified things to do. They're great, but he just is crushing the delivery of it. And that comes across. Like I don't know if this is probably relatable for you, but like right now I've got some coaches working with me on filming a course that we're doing for a rehab company, and my coaches don't have much experience with recording and teaching live for content. And so like just yesterday we were filming some stuff and they were so nervous, uncomfortable with it, and they were like, how do you get better at this? How do you do this? And I showed them a video that I have of me recording something in 2012, and I'm like, look how awful that is. I was atrocious. You get better from doing it, and every time you start to reaffirm more confidence in what you're doing, you practice the skill of speaking, you practice the knowledge that you're discussing, and you start to own it better. But it comes from time, consistency, and in trying to become better at it purposefully.
Life is just reps on reps. It's kind of the way that I view things. Life is a bro split, and it never ends. It never ends. Well, it does, but the bro split lives on. The bro split's legacy will never die. Put it that way. But yeah, I entirely agree. And I've got videos of me giving my best shot many years ago that are very inferior to, I mean, I still cock up quite regularly here. Jamie will testify behind the camera again. But yeah, it's even in the recovery, when I know I've cocked up, where I pick things up from, how I feel about it, how it affects me emotionally, all these things that are just, they come from repetition. In the same way that I know I could go on holiday for 2 weeks, eat like a moron, drink like a moron, come back, and if you said, Fergus, you've got to squat 140 for a set of 5, I'd be like, okay, fine. Maybe I'll front squat it, actually. That's probably never going to go away because of the years and years and years of reps that have come before it. And yeah, if I disappeared for 2 years and went full Tom Hanks off on an island, then maybe I'd lose that ability. But it's the work that you do and the graft that you put in is bringing the foundation up and up and up and up and up, which is where just consistency in whatever sphere you're focusing in is what wins. So something I get a lot of questions on as well, and I kind of avoid the discussion on just because it is a bit of a minefield, and I kind of just make my stance and exit, which is time spent doing mobility versus time spent actually training. and I think CrossFit has a lot to answer for on this, but my take, and feel free to tear this to pieces, is that I will mobilize myself for specific movements ahead of time in the gym. I will spend 0 seconds in any other setting unless I feel the need for relief doing isolated mobility work. And that is because I'm relying on full range of motion stretching under load through my weight training throughout the week. Do you think I'm a dickhead, or do you think that is the correct way to go in some capacity?
Yeah. So first thing, I think what you described is generally very valid. And fun detail here. I'm working on a giant book to be published hopefully at the start of the next year. I'll send you a copy. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Thank you.
The way that I approach this topic, because I think fairly in line with what you just said there, is overwhelming. The biggest benefits that we get from training or from exercise is going to be improving mobility, strength, power. And the activities that we get that most consistently across are going to be these larger, generally compound movements that take us through reasonably deep ranges of motion under control with load. Because when you go into deeper ranges with control, you're going to work on your mobility. If you do it with load, you're going to see positive encouragement for strength adaptations. If you do it with reasonable effort, you'll see power adaptations. My only challenge with that is that it depends where the person is at from a capacity and tolerance standpoint. Like if you are someone at a lower level, you might do mobility exercises until you reach the point that you can do these strengthening exercises. But if you can do strengthening exercises, well, then you're basically just doing a mobility aspect in that movement. And so I think that where possible, you move along a progression of options. And once you can progress to, level D, let's say, you could do the lower things, like let's just say something like a rear foot elevated hip flexor stretch. Sure, that's a fine enough exercise. That might be something like a level B. But if you can do a rear foot elevated split squat, well, you're doing that in combination to developing more strength and the ability to control that motion and utilize it. And so, because most people don't have an endless amount of time to train, you should prioritize what you get the most benefit from, the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak. And in that case, yeah, get lifting, get doing stuff, because generally it will transfer over the most.
No, thanks for flagging the caveat there, because, yeah, essentially from my perspective, and the reason a lot of people ask me the question, are people that are competent enough in training to just get on with the training? But I think it's important not to just go into go towards a barbell and just start squatting.
Yes, I'm with you.
Get yourself loose, get yourself open, and then start the movement. But don't say, I haven't done 30 minutes of mobility, therefore I am at risk of the barbell breaking my spine, which is kind of where narratives have gone in some directions online.
Yeah.
And I think the fear that's instilled in people to not actually just get on with developing their energy systems towards the goals that they might have, or as you said, key detail here is a lot of people are time restricted with their training, very time restricted, which means that if you're spending 20 minutes focusing on excessive mobility potentially to then go and do weighted mobility, which is essentially all weight training really is, then you've missed out on 15 minutes or so potentially of training time that could lead you further along the path of adaptation towards the goals that you are training towards in a time restricted set of circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you mentioned, a caveat yourself where you like to do some of the stuff before a training session, and it's, again, the length of time doing it. I'm in the same boat. Like, I like a generalized, quote-unquote, mobility type warm-up before I get into training. I just think it feels nice, easy transition. I'm not doing it for 20 minutes. Like, it's 3 to 5 minutes, and then I get moving on. And at least in my case, like, I'm often doing some non-lifting activities as well. So then it's kind of hard to directly warm up in just those. Like there's the crowd that says, oh, you don't need to warm up, just your first set of whatever. And, like in my case, like yesterday I was doing some penultimate jumps. I don't think that I can just start with a penultimate jump. It's nice to have a development of here's some light, gentle mobility movements, then here's some A skips and B skips and these things, and then go into them, versus like, yeah, I guess if you were just doing barbell deadlifts, maybe you can just start with that. I personally still wouldn't, but
I'll admit I do with bench press. I am
just want to get it over with, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Bench press is so 2012. It's just every time it's in a training program, I think, even though one of my main goals at the moment is bench press related, but yeah, I do just feel if I do a wide grip, regular grip, close grip bench press with the barbell for a few repetitions, make sure that I can feel everything opening up a little bit, set of 5 with 60 kilos, set of 3 with 100 kilos, and then I'm normally at my working sets not long after that. It does shock people, but it's like, you're already on your top sets. We've only been here 4 minutes. I feel great, and I've wasted no energy. That's the powerlifter in me refusing to die.
Are you doing a hybrid goal with your marathon for your bench press? Or is it just...
No comment.
Oh.
No comment.
All right.
I've been rumbled. It's don't clip this, Elliot. If you Jamie Elliot, we agree not to clip this. So people will need to listen to discover and start thinking. But yeah, my main strength goal, I'm deadlift, bench, and I want to get that 150 Atlas stone over the summer. So I think that the deadlift and the Atlas stone will kind of go in tandem. And to be honest, Atlas stone training last year really helped. I don't know how to describe it, I felt stronger and more protected through a broader range of motion through strongman training last year, because I think the exposure to compromised position strength application helped my deadlift. I always feel like the reason I pull sumo most of the time is because I can predictably program for it because of the fatigue. Whereas if 1 week I'll do 220 for a set of 3 on conventionals, great, RPE 8. The following week 200 doesn't move off the floor, and I'm like, oh, right, that's difficult to program for. But I think strengthening all of the more delicate areas around my erectors, just all of these positions, the upper back, the stuff that comes from it, meant that my conventional deadlift last year was more predictable with the strongman training. So I'm confident that I can work in the Atlas stone prep alongside conventional deadlift and bench press focus. But tacky is the biggest pain in the arse in the world. Like I'm meant to have a full body session today, but I might just cover myself in glue and pick up some heavy concrete balls and call it a day after that, which doesn't really seem the same, does it? How many reps have you done in 3 hours, Fergus? Just the 4.
Yeah.
just the 4 reps. But we've digressed into revealing my plans. But nonetheless, the thing that I think I really want to highlight with the mobility question is it goes back to the grain of sand on top of the pyramid thing, which is the basics are less glamorous. I am in some ways, there's some training sessions now that more than ever I feel I'm going through the motions with a little bit more, but I can always see why they're important. Where I'm needing to fill a gap is with community and training with people. If I'm training on my own and doing the basics, which I've been doing for 13 years consistently at this point, that does get a little bit non-fulfilling. But if I do it with others, I tick that box. But I think, fun question. If you could only do 10 exercises for the rest of your life, what would they be? No preparation, everyone listening. I've completely blindsided you there, but maybe that's the fun. I'll count for you. So we've got 10 to go. 10 to go.
Push press. Sandbag pickup. Sandbag to shoulder, yeah. Snatch. Dips, chin up, front squat, broad jump, max velocity sprint, Cuban press, and a lot of pressure on this one.
There is
deficit RDL.
That is a well-trained man's answer there. Dumbbell incline press, dumbbell decline press.
Dumbbell
very
pec fly.
varied. So there's a lot. Interesting. There's a lot in there that normally wouldn't be put in that framework.
Do you have your 10 answers?
Not off the. Let's play the same game. Okay, right. Okay, I've not prepared and I didn't have this prepared, so I'll go 10. So number 1 is conventional deadlift.
Nice.
Number 2 is military grip pull-up, so overhand pull-up. Number 3, neutral grip pull-up. Number 3, Atlas stone. Number 4 is close grip bench press. Number 5, single arm dumbbell row. Number 6, dumbbell step up. Number 7, strict overhead press. Number 8, deficit stiff leg deadlift. Number 9, I'm trying to think, what am I? Dumbbell hammer curl.
Oh, I was just going to make a joke that neither of us picked a bicep curl, but there we go.
Yeah, there we go. I'm just thinking, if I'm doing all these Atlas stones, I need to strengthen those tendons. Number 10. Oh yeah, you do feel the pressure when it gets to 10, don't you? It really does. I felt my temperature increase there. What am I missing? Obviously not calves. Definitely not calves. The logic would say a tricep exercise, but close grips covered that. So I think something. I'm going to say shield carry.
Whoa!
Oh, I don't have a squat. I don't have a squat, do I?
No.
But
you said step up.
You know what?
Which is...
But I've said, yeah, I actually think if you're not powerlifting, if you're not. Have I missed something there? Well, it was off the cuff. Those are the answers I've gave. Therefore, I can be judged on the
shield
internet.
Shield carry is a cool
peers.
one. Do you guys have a shield?
We've got a sandbag, but we whenever I've done, it's just I find the position. If you can get into the right position, and you can control your breathing, and you can control your steps, the upper back development, the general trunk strength development, and the ability to control tension, the carryover I had from that to front squats last year to just general strength application was huge. My grip, I just felt tighter and more powerful across my upper body.
How heavy are your sandbags?
So we've only got one.
Okay,
and it's 145 kilos. So it's very difficult to shift. But we are going to get some more, because it's something we want to do more of. And now that the weather's starting to improve, which is kind of always hit and miss here in Scotland, we can do a bit more outdoors. But weighted carries I really enjoyed last year, doing things like the nickel stones, that sort of stuff. The hook grip for time is not a nice sensation, but I just enjoyed the novelty of, after so many years of barbell and dumbbell strength application, applying it to odd objects is just good fun. And it's rewarding. It's rewarding. And again, I fight online against people who somehow try and make themselves competitive against me when I don't really care and I'm just doing my own thing. That's the stuff that really reinforces to me that if the goal isn't exciting to me, then don't bother, is picking up heavy objects that were once in a river.
Yeah, that's like when you did the Highland Games. I love the Highland Games.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so fun.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was honestly, after like the strength community, sometimes there can be an air of entry point-ism that goes on.
Yeah.
The friendliness of that event, the fact that I was 30 kilos lighter than the next heaviest competitor there, the way that people interacted, the fact that I had cameras and nobody was sort of, why is the lightest guy filming all this? There was none of that. It was really, really good. And I really, really enjoyed the whole spectacle of the event. The Stoltmans were there. Yeah. They lifted the Dinny Stones for the first time. Me and Johnny lifted them 2 years beforehand, but nothing to brag about there. Just, we're higher on the list than the Stoltmans for lifting the Dinny Stones. That'll be on my tombstone. But yeah, it was just really, really encouraging. That sort of stuff, and then the extreme triathlons that I've done over the years. The simplicity of the application of the sport to a individual sort of adventure / challenge with a bit of a, I don't know, environmental heritage based allure. I mean, they're both in Scotland. Keltman is a good example in the Highland Games. Obviously they're home turf for me, but I think it's just the fact that you're navigating something a bit awkward and difficult through a familiar pathway. Which is either strength testing or a triathlon, for example. That's why I was drawn to extreme triathlons. That's why I really enjoyed the Highland Games. And since the Highland Games, to be perfectly honest, top-end strength work hasn't felt all that exciting to me, even though it's a core component of how I train on a day-to-day basis. So I think the real discussion here between the both of us is on how do we derive enjoyment from training after doing it for so many years, where not getting sucked into the newest shiny thing means that you end up doing a lot of the same thing over and over again for not much gain. So how do you navigate that?
That's one of the reasons I took up hybrid training, essentially. Like, I had very minimally done effortful endurance training, and I was just in this constant pursuit for weightlifting and powerlifting, having done Highland Games and Strongman a little bit, but not very regularly. And I was just chasing a 1 to 3 kilo improvement per year on my snatch, and it was like, man, this is just not very fun anymore. Like at one point doing 9 sessions a week and just seeing the just saddest amount of increase. And it's like, okay, I need something that like gets me excited to see some positive improvements again. And it was like, okay, let's do the endurance stuff. And it was so fun. And I still overall enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. Doing, 1,200 meter repeats isn't very fun, but chasing down now Strongman a little bit. Like I'll probably not go crazy on it. I'm going to be doing a provincial qualifier in September, or the provincials in September. And after that, I'll probably back off. It'll be maybe a change over to Highland Games. We'll see, something else. But just, I like taking on an adventure and seeing what I can develop with it, and then taking lessons from it and moving on. It's really hard, I think, to just get good at it and then see these just sad amount of gains for so long, and then I didn't stop lifting. I'm still trying to get better at it. I actually did hit a deadlift PR after not seeing one for like 6 years, which is great. But how long is it going to take to get another one? Who knows? So I'd rather do something else in the meantime, but try to maintain or marginally improve and learn something else.
That's the exact same mindset I have on things, really. Would you say you're still competitive, or is it purely self-development and discovery?
Well, obviously for endurance, I would never call myself competitive. I don't know if you know, like I'm a rather large human being. Like I'm 6'4", and if I didn't have to cut down to weight, I'd be like 240.
Did you manage did you get 600-pound deadlift and sub 6 mile you were training for, weren't you?
So I did both those. Yeah.
You did both those.
I didn't do them in the
so.
same day, but yeah. And so right now I've ran a 5:22 mile, which is pretty good. I think I'm going to try the 500 and sub 5 minute mile. We'll see. I don't know if I can cut 22 seconds. It's but as soon as I go,
it's a long way.
I'm pretty good at the shorter endurance. Like you've probably seen like the VDOT scale. Those times they don't match for me. Like even my mile to my 5K, modest change, but then when you go, like I did a marathon last year, like it was just such a dramatic drop off. And then like I'm going to be doing an Ironman in August, and it's going to be atrocious, but I'll show up and do it.
Blood occlusion, tension, the amount of muscle tissue that needs fuel of it. It's insane how quickly that drop off can occur. And I think it's when you start knocking on the door of the marathon training, that's where things get interesting, because you're just sustaining an effort for a long period of time where the amount of work your body's doing, trying to just shuffle everything around your body when there's more surface area to hit, it gets very tough. It gets very tough. I mean, I think my best mile versus 5K. I mean, 5K, I think I've dropped off. I've tried to go sub 18 twice at 205 to 210 pounds, and the best I've got is 1811, because I just can't quite sustain that sort of pacing, because I just feel the weight kicking. I just feel, but that's the fun. That's the compromise at the end of the day. That is what we need to deal with. So I think the other query I had, and this is a rabbit hole, potentially a whole other podcast, is as people can call me arrogant for this. I don't care. I'd say both of us can probably say that we have a very good objective understanding of the origins, definition, and parameters by which we can measure hybrid training, quote unquote. However, the internet seems to have lost its grasp as to what that is. So if you were to define it by your terms, what would that be? And how disparate do you think that is with the narrative that's sort of swirling around the internet right now?
It's just fitness, bro. No, I don't think that's so funny when people say that. Like, you're so disillusioned.
I know.
I'm sorry. I don't want to sound like a dick, but if it was just fitness, like, oh, it's just lifting and cardio. Well, okay, so you're going to tell me, like, look at a bodybuilder.
Picking up rocks.
Yeah, exactly. So in my stance, I think this falls in line with, the origin coming from Alex Veda, essentially, where it's like the ability to pursue two divergent, roughly physical traits and seeing improvements in both of them, or at least maintaining and improving in the opposite. So, yeah, like, I don't think you see too many people making meaningful improvements in the gym and running who call it just fitness. Like, that's not the case. Sure, they maybe lift and run, but it's not the same thing. Sure, it looks the same, but you could say that about bodybuilding and powerlifting. They look similar, but they're not the same thing.
That's the nuance is hard to describe without feeling like you're undermining people who are doing those things without the desire to make progress in both concurrently, which I don't want to do. But it's the rising of egos that are trying to protect and define a term that's already sort of defined is kind of where frustrations can build at my end. But I say again, I'm quite fortunate that I don't feel competitive in any way anymore. I just like doing my own thing. Whereas I feel like I'd spend a lot more time pissed off on the internet if I was, and I definitely would have done a Hyrox by now if that was the case, because I feel like it's something that I could probably adapt to quite well. But I genuinely just don't feel any sense of excitement towards it. I'd rather spend the next 6 months trying to shift that 150 kilo Atlas stone. If that makes me the weird one here, then I'm more than happy to be the weird one. But what I will say is, if the label allows people to discover something that they previously thought they couldn't do by whatever means and however definition, fantastic. What I do reject is the zealot mindset of people believing that their box is the best and therefore any new box is therefore somehow invalidated. And CrossFit, great example. Functional fitness. How hard did CrossFit and functional fitness have to fight to become valid in the eyes of the fitness industry? And now they're bashing the concept of hybrid training, which is different to CrossFit and has proven time and time again that there's only a few examples of high-level CrossFitters who have taken on things that require more than 20 minutes of sustained effort. James Newbury, great example. But there really aren't many. And that just goes to show the different demand of the energy systems that are at play, which is why there was a need for a definition and a separation in the first place. But I think the thing I struggle with is the fact that there's many people from that camp that have only recently been formally established and accepted that are now doing what they were viciously arguing against others doing not even that long ago, which is tearing down something new and is giving people value. And the beauty of hybrid training for me as an individual is having access to all of the different lessons, applications, experiences that come from all of these different things, and absorbing that into myself to then do with as I please. And I believe that you're in many ways the same, which is why this can be a frustrating world to exist in, where it's difficult for that to be what shines through. But then again, if it's making other people try new things, then I don't really care what the definition is.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to ruffle the feathers, but then for the other people, it gets them out and trying something new. And probably, like I've seen this where it's been probably the biggest exposure is people who are lifting now deciding to do more endurance stuff. And I think that's fantastic.
Agreed. If you were to go on Andrew Huberman's podcast, what would you like your overarching message to be to an audience of that size?
Crush the basics, how you can actually make changes to do that. I would probably spend a lot of time talking about those things that we were briefly discussing earlier, about the habits and lifestyle changes in detail, and trying to provide a practical strategy and system that they can implement and understand why they want to do that. And
is there a lifetime hybrid goal that you have on an iPhone note or piece of paper somewhere that you'd like to work towards and are happy to share without the fear of judgment at this point?
One that I'm going to try to do, I actually got from a friend of yours, which is to do a sub 40-minute 10K and squat 400 pounds for 10 reps in the same day.
And who was the friend that gave you that idea?
Oh, man, I feel bad that I'm forgetting it now.
I have a very similar thing in my little black book of ideas here. Something I want to do over the summer as part of my sub 3 prep is a 400-pound squat and a 400-pound squat and 10K under 40 minutes. So I want to start high bar, knee sleeves, lifting shoes, the squat rack on the track, 400-pound squat, knee sleeves off, shoes on, get going, try and do that all under 40 minutes. And upset a lot of council organizations by using their track for doing so in the process.
So you're gonna squat in running shoes? Or
No. I think I'll just change my shoes. I think I'll just make it as ridiculous a spectacle as possible for the sheer hell of it. And also, it upset a lot of runners last time I was lifting weights on a track because they hadn't seen that before. But I just, the ridiculousness of these things is appealing to me. But so the blood occlusion and tension and fatigue that comes from that. So you squat straight into the 10K or the other way around?
No, you do. It's the same day, so you don't have to go straight into it. Yeah. I'm gonna find out.
400 pounds for 10. You've got that now, don't you?
Yes, so I can do that. And then the 10K though is the tricky part. I haven't done that. My best 5K is just under 20 minutes, so it'll be pretty challenging.
What do you weigh currently at your small height of 6'4"?
235 pounds.
Okay. It's a big man. There's a big man moving around that track. That's yeah. Try and find a downhill course with a tailwind.
Exactly.
Would be the way to do it.
James Blanchard.
James Blanchard.
Yeah.
Yes. He's one of our coaches.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
He posted that he was going to train for that, and I was like, that sounds really hard. And it would require me to improve the best in my running. Because again, like the lifting, not that crazy, but I can maintain that pace. Like right now, I did 5 by 1K at 3:45 with a 1K easy in between, and I was like, okay, this is viable, but getting those continuously is going to be the tricky part.
Yep, yeah, that's piecing that together. It's funny when you feel a pace for the first time in a while. You're like, doing this 9 more times.
Yeah,
this is going to be interesting. I'm just getting used to track work again. I am enjoying the honesty of it as well. And yeah, just getting back to consistent 1:15 400s as repeatable as possible. Just every time I do that, it makes me wonder, how the hell did I ever get to sub 5? Why would I ever want to do that again? You'll never do that again. And then there's this little voice in the back of my head that says, do it 3 more times in one go. So we'll see. I might even try and go again at the 500-pound deadlift and mile under 5 minutes this year, because
it was close.
I think it was close. And pacing wise, there were a few things we could have tweaked. I could be lighter for that as well, and I'm going to be getting a bit lighter for marathon prep. So it was quite difficult to train for my first ever strongman competition and a sub 5 minute mile at the same time. That was an interesting dichotomy that I presented to myself there, but I had fun. So we all win. Well, really enjoyed that. I think loads of things to take away that hopefully people can use as a lens for critical thinking within an industry that is telling you lots of different things all at once. But if you try and distill everything down to its core, the basics win every time. The basics done consistently win every time. So where is the best place for people to find you and find out more of all of your basics focused knowledge? Right now,
easiest place is Instagram. Yeah, I've got a ton of big things coming out in a few months, but nothing public right now. So yeah.
Oh, well, that's a well-trained dangling of the carrot at the end of the podcast there. Well played. And it's Dr. Sam Spinelli, isn't it?
Yeah.
Be in the show notes down below.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, my man. Really enjoyed that, and I'm sure we'll speak again very soon on something silly that we've done in training together.
Thanks for having me on.
Good man. Thank you.